So the time has come to recruit a new wizard to help you on your adventures. But is the man before you a genuine mage, or are they a fraud? Let's find out today with a game of Real Spell, Fake Spell on this episode of the Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Mark and I am the Local Disaster Tour Guide. Yes, that's right, I'm a dungeon master who lives for the moment that you fail that saving throw. I'd like to thank you for joining me. Today we're going to be playing a game that me and my friends like to call Real Spell, Fake Spell. Now, in fantasy role-playing, my favorite class is actually the wizard. I love the wizard class. I love the archetype of the intellectual, driven, willful person poring over ancient texts and unlocking the keys to the universe and using those keys to warp reality to whatever they see fit. I love wizards. I love playing them. It is my favorite class in fantasy role-playing. And I appreciate all of the creative writers behind our games that have delivered dozens and hundreds of fantastic spells for this particular archetype. But you know, sometimes when you start looking at these spells, you begin to wonder, is this a real spell or is this a fake spell? Me and my gaming group, we love to take new role-playing products that come out and go through the spells and try to determine whether it is a true example of arcane might or a questionable con being thrown at us. Now I'll tell you that this particular game can be played with almost any fantasy role-playing system out there. There is quite a bit of material, so for today's video, we're going to be looking specifically at Pathfinder 1st Edition and their core rulebook. I'd like to give you my top 10 real spell, fake spell moments from Pathfinder. So please play along with me. Do you think these are real spells or fake spells? So before we dig into the list proper, I would like to do a couple of honorable mentions. The first honorable mention that I'd like to talk about today is the spell Detect Thoughts. This is a classic spell, and it is a favorite of any intrigue-style character. If you're playing a spy master, or if you're trying to gather information in a clandestine fashion, this is the spell for you. And the spell does exactly what you think it would do. It allows you to locate thinking creatures, and with a little concentration, begin to read their surface thoughts. Well, there's a lot to like about this spell. But when you look at the components of the spell Detect Thoughts, you begin to ask some questions. In Pathfinder 1e, there are 4 types of components. Verbal components, things that a caster might say. Somatic components, gestures that a caster might make. And then material or focus components, which are items that are used to direct the magic. Well, Detect Thoughts has verbal and somatic components, and that's normal for a caster. But it's the material component that raises some questions for me, because the material component of the spell Detect Thoughts is a single copper piece. Penny for your thoughts? Do you think this is a real spell or a fake spell? Now, if I'm being honest, I think that is a cool and a flavorful thing that the game designers added to the game, but it still illustrates an occasion where the components in the spell description make you stop and think. For my next honorable mention, I'd like to talk about a couple of cantrips from Pathfinder. Now, cantrips are extremely low-level magic that do not require a lot of energy from the spellcaster to use. And in this case, I would like to talk about the cantrips Ghost Sound and Lullaby. And really, my question on both of these spells is, why did we need magic to do them? Let's start with Ghost Sound. Hide around the corner and rattle some chains. Scratch on the walls. There's plenty of ways to make ghost sounds that don't require calling upon eldritch arcane secrets to do so. Anybody with a little creativity can come up with some incredible ghost sounds at the drop of a hat. And then we have the spell Lullaby. I did not realize that one of the courses at Wizard School was how to properly put your children to bed. That seems like a strange thing to focus your magical studies on. But let's be fair for a minute. 0 level spells, cantrips, they are minor magical tricks, so you could really poke a lot of fun at a lot of 0 level spells that are in the game. But I think it's time to move in to the list proper, and there is one cantrip that I would like to talk about on this list. So, number 10, the Cantrip Message. Now on the surface, this spell actually seems like a genuine arcane trick that is useful and practical to have. And it allows you to have a whispered conversation with another person over a distance. That's a pretty nice trick. However, when we examine the components of this spell, I do have a small question. You see, the material components for the spell message is a piece of copper wire. The reason that I ask the question, is this a real spell, is pretty simple. It does not specify how long that wire is and whether or not 2 tin cans are connected to the end of them. It is very possible that many of us have cast the message spell during our childhood. So number 9, see Invisibility. This is a very practical utility spell that a lot of wizards take that allows you to detect invisible creatures and invisible objects in your environment. And I am not discounting the utility of this spell, but once again, when you look at the material components, you have to question whether or not this is a real spell. You see, the material component is talk. Did our party wizard really draw upon his arcane knowledge to reveal the location of invisible creatures? Or did he just grind up a bunch of chalk and throw it everywhere? I'm pretty sure the party rogue did the same thing last week. Speaking of spells that really are just creative applications of tools, we have number 8, water breathing. Now, this is a very practical spell for any party that needs to survive going underwater. And I can see a lot of practicality in having this spell available. But again, when you look at the material components, you notice that the spell calls for a reed or a straw. Now, don't get me wrong, that's some clever out-of-the-box thinking and will help you in a lot of situations, but I'm pretty sure Robin Hood pulled that stunt when I was a kid. Also, another question that I have, water breathing specifically notes that it can affect multiple creatures at once, but it doesn't say if they all need their own straws. But I'd like to step away from clever tool usage and move on to the number 7 spell on our list, which is Flame Arrow. Now, I have included Flame Arrow on our list today because of all of the elemental attack spells in the game, Flame Arrow is definitely the most questionable. Now, for evocation wizards, for blaster casters, elemental attack spells are a very common type of spell. Take Acid Arrow, where you shoot a line of acid from your finger and use it to damage your opponents. Fiery Arrow is not that style of spell. Instead, Fiery Arrow specifically allows you to take a package of ammunition and cause that ammunition to deal fire damage when it is used. So let me ask you, what are the material components for the Flame Arrow spell? Oil and flint. You know, I'm pretty sure that you could give any commoner in a fantasy role-playing game access to the exact same material components, and they could use that spell over and over and over again without expending a single spell slot. This is definitely the most questionable attack spell in the game. So now it's time for number 6, and I imagine that many of you have probably predicted that this spell was going to make an appearance on this list. That's right, our number 6 real spell, fake spell candidate is Stinking Cloud. This spell creates a large cloud of nauseating gas that fills an area and makes creatures within it sick. And as many gamers might know, the components for this spell are eggs and cabbage leaves. Yeah, that joke just made an appearance on my channel. Sad day. I am reasonably sure that the wizard didn't actually cast a real spell here. Their supper just isn't sitting very well with them. So now we're to the top half of our list, and that brings us to number 5, Hideous Laughter. Now, I am a little sad to include this spell on our list today because, well, it's the dad joke spell. If you've watched Critical Role, you know that Hideous Laughter is an incredible spell to have at the gaming table because you just get to insert so many terrible jokes into your games. And I personally believe that the more other players are groaning at the joke you just made, the higher the save DC to that spell actually should be. However, when we look at this spell with a critical eye, you will notice that one of the components for this spell is actually a feather. So this begs the question, is the wizard truly using mind manipulating magic to send his target into fits of terrible laughter? Or is he just tickling them relentlessly with a giant feather? Okay, so for number 4 on my list today, I'm actually going to cheat, and I'm going to combine 2 spells. I'm going to combine the spell Shout and Greater Shout. Both of these are attack spells that allow you to deal sonic damage in an area in front of you. Basically, you're creating a loud noise that damages everything that's caught in the area. Now, the components for both of these spells raise some questions for me. If we start with the Shout spell, it only has one kind of component, and that is a verbal component. So, is the wizard casting a spell, or is he just obnoxiously yelling at people? Now, as questionable as that is, the Greater Shout spell actually upgrades the damage of the Shout spell by adding a material component, which is a metal horn. I'm not so sure that this is actually a spell, as much as it is a guy that really needs to have his bullhorn taken away from him. So for number 3 on our list, I would like to talk about the spell Grease. This is another classic low-level wizard spell. It's used for manipulating the battlefield. You take an area of the battlefield and you make it extremely slick. And any enemy that attempts to move through the area, they have to make a saving throw or fall flat on their back. So, let me ask you, what material components do you need to cast the spell Grease? Would it surprise you to learn that the answer is butter? I have to ask, is the wizard really casting a spell, or did he just need a few minutes with some open flame to really set the battlefield in his favor? So, welcome to number 2 on the list. We're approaching the end of the list, so we really need to zero in on some major offenders when it comes to the real spell, fake spell dichotomy. And For number 2, we're going to hit another classic wizard spell, Alarm. Now, you may have noticed as we've gone through this list that a lot of the wizard utility spells really end up sounding like creative tool usage more than anything else, and the alarm spell is no different. This is a spell that parties use quite a bit. When you're setting up camp for the night, you typically want the wizard to set up the alarm spell so that if something tries to attack you in the middle of the night, you have this audible sound that will awaken the party and allow them to respond to the threat. By this point, you can probably guess what the material components for this spell are going to end up being. That's right, the spell Alarm requires you to use some wire and a small bell. Gee, I wonder what sound the alarm makes when it wakes you up. Yet again, we find ourselves in a situation where any party member, given the same components, could produce the same effect without spending a spell slot to do it. So here we are. Number 1. What is the most questionable spell, in my opinion, in the core Pathfinder rule set? Well, I believe the worst offender on this list is the spell Hallucinatory Terrain. This is a spell that allows you to alter the appearance of the landscape around you. And by the way, it is very important to note that you only alter the appearance of the landscape. You don't alter the appearance of the creatures that are in the area. You don't alter the appearance of buildings or objects that might appear in the area. The only thing you are altering is the landscape itself. So let's take a look at the spell and ask the question that we've asked many times before. What are the material components for Hallucinatory Terrain? Well, the answer is sticks, leaves, and rocks. Wizards, let's talk for a minute. I'm really sorry to break this to you, but there is a term for using leaves, sticks, and rocks to alter the appearance of the landscape around you. And that term is not wizardry, it's gardening. Listen, gardening is a great hobby. I respect it. I've got plenty of friends who raise gardens, and there is nothing wrong with a little profession herbalism on your character sheet. But please realize we know a fake spell when we see one. So thank you for joining me for this silly conversation as we've dived into some of the more questionable items of flavor text that exist inside fantasy role-playing games. Please help me keep the conversation going. Let me know which spells you believe are good candidates for real spell, fake spell. Throw your favorite suggestions in the comments below, and let me know if you enjoy material like this. I would definitely be open to creating a real spell, fake spell part 2. Do the other YouTube stuff, like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to our channel. I'm Mark, the local disaster tour guide, and may your next game be a critical success. Have a great day. Hello everyone, Mark here. It's time for my post-credits volunteer shout-out. At my real job, I serve as a chaplain and volunteer coordinator, and I have the opportunity to see the impact that volunteers have each and every day, both at my job and throughout my community. Volunteers do some incredible work, and they really change the lives of people all around them. So I like to take a little bit of time and just encourage people to search for opportunities to volunteer and to be a blessing to the people around them. If you haven't done a lot of volunteering in the past, it may be difficult to know where to start. And I would like to offer a suggestion to you. Volunteer Match is a website specifically for people looking for opportunities to volunteer, and I'm actually going to throw a link in the description below. But if you're looking for a place to volunteer, Go to Volunteer Match. Nonprofits can post jobs electronically, and you can search for volunteer positions that match your interests and the areas where you really have a passion for making a difference. Volunteer Match right now actually has a lot of volunteer positions that are specific to the COVID-19 virus that is going around. And you may be asking, are there volunteer opportunities available during a quarantine? Actually, there are. There is an entire page of volunteer opportunities that represent real needs that we have right now. So if you're looking for a way to give back during these difficult times, I encourage you to go to that website and to check out some of the opportunities that they have posted. But thank you again and have a fantastic day.